All right. Well, thank you. So just to get started then. So, briefly looking through your LinkedIn, I see that your career, like, or at least your LinkedIn indicates your career started with Director of Global Marketing at Corion Corporation. But, I assume maybe you had different jobs before then, that led you to kind of start your professional career in marketing. I was just wondering if you could maybe like talk us through that, like where you really started, what got you into marketing. I know also you studied English, for example, at
Mhm.
your bachelor, so maybe not as directly correlated right away.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I was an English major. I mean, you did your research, and I kind of grew up with my parents thinking that I would get an undergrad degree and then go to grad school and then figure out what I was going to do, but I didn't really want to do that. So after I graduated, we were in an economic recession, so it was a really tough time to get a job. And I remember working with like an employment agency, and I don't even know if these kind of agencies really still exist, but I just gave them my resume and they found jobs and pointed me to a medical device startup. So I was I don't know, I was one of the very early employees. I was hired as the receptionist. And I remember when I was interviewing and the CEO of the company, there was only like 15 people, so I got to meet the CEO. He said, "Well, why do you want to be a receptionist?" I said, "Well, I don't really want to be a receptionist. I just want to learn about a business, and I feel like this is going to be a great way for me to do that." So he obviously thought that that was a good answer because I got the job. And it really was true because, I was the receptionist sitting at a desk out front, which meant that like anyone who ever came into the office, I got to meet them, I got to talk to them. And so I got to meet vendors and potential clients. But also, like I said, the company was very small. We probably had like five executives. Then we had the people who actually assembled the med devices, and there were probably like five other people in the company. So, you really got to work with everybody. And I apologize, this is kind of a long story, but what happened is that the director of marketing came to me while I'm sitting at the front desk, like answering phones and, doing administrative stuff. And he said, "Hey, could you proofread this paper I wrote for me?" And I was like, "Sure." So I started proofreading papers, which then led to proofreading advertising, which then led to working with the manufacturers that were developing our packaging and doing the design and like all of the marketing materials. So after a couple of years of doing that, I knew I was kind of outgrowing the company. There wasn't really anything else for me to do, but still didn't really know what kind of jobs to look for. And so I had a mentor at the company who he said, "Well, what do you like about your job?" And I said, "Well, I like working with the vendors and the writing and the creative and all of these things." And he said, "Well, that's marketing communications." So that was the direction that I needed to channel my English degree and the things that I had been learning in this startup where there was just always more work to do than there are people to do it. And, understanding then like, oh, this is a career path that I can go on. So that sent me down the career path of marketing, communications, and marketing. That was then like the emergence of the internet. So there was lots of technology companies and lots of opportunity. And so that's how I got into technology. And then the role at Curion, that was one of my first real leadership roles that I was hired into. So over the course of, being an individual contributor and then, being part of bigger teams and leading projects, and then, kind of, oh, we can make you a manager now and inheriting people and growing up as a manager that way. When I was hired at Curion, I was brought in as a director. There was a team there, but I had to evaluate that team and obviously grow that team. And, that's what I've really been doing since then, in most companies that I've worked at, coming in at the leadership level.
Okay, yeah, that's a very interesting story. I think like definitely startups provide like a lot of like valuable experience to people to really just, try everything. So obviously now you're kind of CMO at HR Rebooted, but like kind of before we kind of discuss like that company right now, I guess I was curious, what do you think are like some of the most important traits or skills someone should have in order to jump from like maybe a regular marketing associate to director of marketing, vice president of marketing, chief marketing officer? Is it maybe like the project management skills? Is it like certain industry experience, research skills? Like what do you think is like the most important trait someone should have?
That's a really good question, and I'm gonna kind of answer it differently, but I will go back. One of the things that I wished I had known earlier in my career that I really believe in now is the importance of having a mentor and having someone that you can work with early in your career that can stay with you as you develop in your career because they can help give you, a perspective external from the company that you may be working at as far as your professional maturity and your readiness and, all of those things that help you work your way up, obviously the executive level. So that's the first advice that I would give to anyone that I really wish that someone had given to me. I've had lots of mentors at different points in my career, and they've helped me at what was going on at the time. But if I look back and think, if I had had someone for like 20 years of my career, how incredibly valuable I think that that would have been. All of that said, with regard to traits, um, marketing is a very broad field, and so there's lots of different skill sets that can be very successful in marketing. There's the analytics, right? So, your combination of a business analytics degree and marketing, that will enable you to go, in a lot of different directions with regard to business growth and revenue generation. And it may not be within a marketing department per se, but it gives you the whole entire understanding of like, the life cycle of growth and measurement and goal setting and KPIs and like all those things, right? Then there's content marketing. And those are the people who, are doing the writing and translating what the product or service may do into a value proposition and creating case studies and doing writing and all of those things. And so those are two very, very different skill sets. Then there's lots of different things in between. There's events and experiential marketing and whether you're in B2B or business to consumer, there's lots of different avenues. So I think that there's opportunity to grow into leadership roles from any individual path. And the way that you do that, number one, is curiosity. Always asking questions, being as close as you can to people in more senior roles, even if you're just listening, and sitting in, so that then you can go back and ask questions later so you can learn more about like, well, I wonder, why did they ask the question from that perspective? I would have asked it from this perspective. But, then you can learn how someone at the leadership level, what their thought process is and what their critical thinking process is. So, like, you can learn from that. It's also stepping up and, accepting and volunteering for opportunities. Especially at startups, but really in any company now, there are projects that add value that, don't necessarily have a specific owner. And, if you're in a position to step up and say like, hey, you know what, I'm willing to take that on because taking on a project usually involves collaboration. It's just, it just needs somebody to lead it. And so that's another way to demonstrate leadership skills is leading a project, collaborating with people, whether it's within your function or cross-functionally to bring people together. But you have the leader, as the leader is still responsible like for the output of bringing that group together. And then the other thing I would say is don't be shy to ask for opportunities. There was a long time in my career that I only got promotions when I asked for them. And it's great when you hear stories, especially on LinkedIn, people say like, "Oh, I was given this promotion and given this and given this." I'm not saying they didn't earn it because they did. But not all companies are like that or have a culture like that. And there's nothing wrong with saying to your manager, you know what? I want to get promoted to director. What do I need to do that? And then if you have a good manager that's committed to your success, which is always the most important thing to me as a manager, is I'll say, you know what? These are the things that you need to do. Let's come up with a 6-month plan or 3-month plan or whatever the plan is. And then you know that you can work towards that. Because it's a lot, well, in my experience, it's a lot easier to move up within the role that you're in than to try and move up in your next role. Going from senior manager to director, for example. You want to try and go from a senior manager to a director within the company that you're in. It'll be a lot easier to get that director level role, in the next company. And then I would say the same, for VP and CMO even as well.
Yeah, I'd say job hopping is definitely a lot more frequent nowadays than it was back then in terms of chasing promotions.
Yeah. But really, I mean, promotions are important. Obviously, you want the title and the money, but you want the recognition and you want to feel appreciated and you want to feel like you're making a contribution. And so, I'll tell you, anyone who's been around as long as I have has worked in a bad place that you didn't feel appreciated, that didn't take care of its employees. And I don't really wish that on anybody, but there's also something to be said about being somewhere that's bad and then going somewhere that's good and saying, okay, this is the way it's going to be from now on. And I'm not gonna work in a toxic culture. And I'm not gonna work for a boss who doesn't support me. And I'm not gonna work at a company that doesn't have a career path. And then you find, the places that do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Totally makes sense. So I guess I wanted to ask you more questions now on kind of what you've been working on now.
Mhm.
You recently started working for HR Rebooted, and please correct me if I'm wrong with anything I'm about to say. But so I guess like my understanding of it is, or at least your previous experiences have maybe dealt a little bit more with sales and like selling to HR, or at least currently maybe selling like the AI governance to HR, you know, departments of a company. How closely does sales work with marketing, or what would you say are kind of like the main distinctions between the two when they work together?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, I believe that sales and marketing have to operate as a unified growth team in order to be successful. Because if marketing's doing a whole bunch of stuff over here and sales is doing a whole bunch of stuff over here, and they're not talking to each other and they're not listening to each other, it's just spinning wheels. I mean, sure, there can be some success there, but the idea is for marketing sales to focus on growth, whether that's new business growth or existing customer growth, whatever the business strategy is, and approaching that go-to-market strategy together. And that includes, with the product team, and understanding what the product or what the service is. Like, you know, everybody's worked in companies where sales is selling stuff that like doesn't even exist yet. Well, that's not really fair to product or marketing. I mean, everybody has to work together. So, I mean, in my experience has always been in marketing, and I've been lucky that I've worked in a number of organizations where sales and marketing have collaborated together very well in that marketing asks the questions, what is it that you need, sales? Where are the gaps? And sales is able to communicate that so then they can figure out how to fill them. And it doesn't mean that marketing is a service organization, like I'll just produce whatever it is you say, but it's a mutual understanding of like, well, how do we differentiate ourselves from the competition and, capture the market share that we're after so that it makes it easier to close deals. So there's less friction when sales is trying to close deals. And so, what I'm doing now at HR Rebooted is, the same strategically. We don't have a sales organization. We are an early stage startup, and so we're just going to market with our new product. There are three of us who are partners, and we will have a sales leader joining us hopefully at the beginning of 2026. And so, what I'm doing right now is really trying to lay the foundation through the HR network that I've built throughout my career through marketing, as well as the founder of our company. She's an HR person. And trying to get as much exposure as we can to people who could be potential buyers. So, when sales comes in, they're going to want to learn, well, what have we learned about the customer? What have we learned about the pain points and the challenges that we're trying to solve for them? And then, help us really on the hunting part of sales. It's like, okay, we need to identify more opportunities. And then that's where also marketing and sales really need to collaborate on, okay, well, where is our target audience? Where are they digitally? Where are they, in real life? So that we can position ourselves, at the places where our potential buyers are going to be together.
It's really interesting. Like in terms of like that positioning, um, the thing you just discussed, how obviously there's obvious indicators such as like sales or like, how many people purchase things, but how else can you measure that metric in terms of identifying if you're positioning yourself well? For example, uh, New Balance, right? They're trying to kind of be known for selling their apparel instead of just selling their shoes. And obviously, similarly to you guys with your product, you can maybe measure success by just sales figures or, numbers. But how else do you think, companies can measure it? Or is there maybe a specific kind of like guide or things, checklist maybe you look at in order to identify these things?
That's a really good question. And I think the short answer is yes. There are always other important indicators that can be measured in addition to sales. Leading indicators, lagging indicators. I mean, you probably have heard those terms before
Mhm.
in your analytics classes and all of that. Where we are at HR Rebooted, being such an early stage company, we've got very specific KPIs around how many people can we get to participate in our beta program. If we can get interest in our beta program, which means that they actually get to use the product, we're not charging them for it yet, but they're giving us feedback, they're helping us work out the bugs, and then can we eventually convert them to a customer? So the more people we can get to work with us in that capacity, that's a leading indicator, hopefully for potential revenue, right? We also have some what I would call lower in the funnel, or actually higher in the funnel, people who aren't necessarily ready to buy yet. But we've got a couple of surveys on our website. And if we can get people to engage with these surveys, which are specifically, is your company ready to implement, AI strategy? And is your leadership ready to implement AI strategy? If we can get people to download these surveys, those are leading indicators that people are interested in what we have to say. So,
Yeah.
what can we do to engage them further? And then maybe we get them into the beta program, or when the product actually goes into live production next year, can we get them to see a demo? Which that will be another leading indicator. And so those are some, number one, very early stage company, number two, software B2B company, leading indicators that we're going to be measuring. I think when you get to, I mean, number one, when you get to like the real enterprise scale and companies have very sophisticated funnels as far as how long does it take for someone once they've engaged with us to actually convert to a customer, and how many stages in that process exist, and is it a 6 month sales cycle or a 2 year sales cycle, right? There's so many different either leading or lagging indicators that you can identify to say, oh shoot, we're really behind on this KPI. That's going to affect this KPI, which is going to lag, and all of the results moving forward. So I know you understand how that works. So kind of the short answer was yes. Long answer, lots of different key performance indicators. I've been saying KPIs, if you didn't know what that was. Key performance indicators that a business can identify to help project, what their potential revenue is going to look like.
And that makes sense. So I know you recently, well, you just mentioned that you guys kind of hand out these surveys and try to kind of analyze the data with that or, see interactions. And you did mention maybe like one of the questions is like, is your company ready to implement AI strategy, for example? Um, from what you have noticed, what is companies' biggest obstacle in saying like, yes, we are ready to implement this, or like, no, we are not? Have you seen like a common theme or trend?
That's a really good question. The trend really is that companies don't know what to do yet. They know that they need to do something. And, I think that's what's kind of exciting, about going into a new year when people are setting, new objectives and goals that they need to achieve for their business. 2025 was absolutely the year of AI adoption. 2024 was the year of, for some companies adoption, but more companies probably experimentation, right? So if you look at 2024 as experimentation, 2025 is adoption. Now 2025, 20, excuse me, now 2026 has to be about policy and governance and strategy. Like, it's been the wild, wild west this year because everybody knows that they need to adopt AI. Boards are saying it, CEOs are saying it, but the employees are saying, but I don't know what to do. Like, I'm not sure what's okay. Am I allowed to do this? And then there's other employees who will just push the boundaries and they'll just do it, ask for forgiveness, rather than permission. And companies are realizing that like now's the time we got to get a handle on this because there's a lot of risk. And so that's what we're really excited about, going to market with this solution because we do believe it's very, very timely for, where we are in this AI revolution.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I guess it is curious because well, I'm not sure how much of this you can like speak more into, but it does kind of, or at least raises the question for me, like, do them implementing this, does that require maybe like a new AI browser that, doesn't share their information or, like it's kind of tricky to understand how that would really work.
You mean like creating a private LLM for your company?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's not exactly what our platform does, but I mean, I know that there are capabilities to do that. So, what our solution does, it has two components. The first component is the roadmap, and that's we call only human in the loop. So it's not an AI driven solution, but it's a SaaS-based solution that's the 7 steps towards establishing your governance policy. So you want to start with I don't know the 7 steps by heart. I should, but you want to start with creating your governance committees, and then you need to come up with your training and your content and rolling that all out. And then how's it going to impact your workforce? And how are you going to measure it? You're going to have dashboards. And so that's going to be integrated into other solutions in your enterprise, which then the other piece of the software will integrate with all the AI solutions. So if you work in a company that's decided that ChatGPT is your enterprise solution, API right into this platform. If it's Gemini, if it's Claude, marketing is probably using 5 different things, right? Anything that has an API will API right into our solution. And then it will apply the policies that have been developed to make sure that people are using AI properly, responsibly, ethically, and in accordance with, the policy set up by the company. So, like I said, I mean, I am not trying to like do a pitch here, but we're getting positive feedback to the product because people are saying like, "Oh my gosh, yes, my company needs something like this." And so, hopefully we're striking when the iron's hot and we'll have a big year next year.
Yeah, sounds like very interesting. And I, at least even in my previous internship, it was tricky to, again, use AI. Like you can't really just open a browser, open ChatGPT up and start using it.
So you
So
had a company, so that was the company policy and like it was blocked from the internal browsers?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no AI tools allowed. Like the
Mhm.
yeah.
But really though, I mean, don't
Yeah,
people still?
yeah, that was exactly my point. Like, maybe it was blocked from the company computer, but I could open up my phone and just, ask it to solve this question or like answer this question instead of, answering it on my computer.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, that's interesting that the company had a policy because not every company does. And we're also focused on like the mid-market. So I think the larger enterprises are more on top of this. I don't know where your internship was, but this is our solution is really for the mid-market companies that aren't already heavily regulated. Companies like life sciences and med device and even financial services, they've got their own regulatory bodies that they probably have already figured out what they need to do with AI, at least from a policy perspective, because their regulatory bodies are already built into their business. But technology and professional services and legal and other industries that aren't regulated, they need some kind of structure around the way people can and cannot use AI. So that's who we're going after.
Makes a lot of sense. I guess like taking a step back just to like some advice for students. You're kind of like in the cross section, I would say, of like AI and marketing. Um, what do you think AI skills marketing students should learn in order to, become good marketers in the real world? Is it something like prompting or, things of that nature?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, one of the biggest challenges for everybody, but I think especially marketers, is it is impossible to keep up. I mean, literally, you could spend every day trying to learn a new AI technology that's probably related to marketing in some capacity, and just it'll never end, right? So, I mean, I think prompting is universal at this point. Like, understanding how to create good prompts. And you can learn that as you go along, but I mean you're already doing it, right? Obviously because you know. So I think having a level of prompt proficiency is important. Um, but as far as tools, I think you just need to be curious. And I mean, honestly, I expect of your generation that like you'll just learn whatever tools you need to learn on the job. I mean, even 10 years ago, I remember, I would interview people and be like, okay, I mean, I know you know HubSpot, but like, do you think you'll be able to use Marketo? Like, they're different. I wouldn't even ask that question now. Like, because do you know what they are, what those marketing automation platforms are?
I know HubSpot because of
Okay.
Scott. He made
Yeah.
us use it in one of his classes.
Okay. So if you the bottom line is I expect your generation to be technically proficient enough that you will learn whatever it is you need to learn on the job. And if you know HubSpot, yeah, you can step right into a job in HubSpot and figure it out. But you could also get a job where they're using Pardot, which is Salesforce Marketing Cloud, or Marketo. It might take you a week to figure it out, rather than on day one. So, that would just be my expectation. So be curious. Um, Utilize free tools. I don't know what kind of tools you're already using, like, in your courses and in your curriculum, what you get exposed to, but there's a lot of free courses out there, free products out there. I would also encourage you to spend some time on LinkedIn. If you don't already have a LinkedIn profile, create one. Use a professional photo. That's like you could take a screenshot from this call and like that could be your photo because
Yeah.
that's better than like,
A
something
selfie.
outside with your
Yeah.
friends that like you're
Hmm.
chopping other people out because some people
Yeah.
do that. It's like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Um, and spend time, following just people who are publishing content about AI. I mean, I could give you the names of some people to follow. There's a woman named Lisa Adams. It's spelled Liza, Lize, but she's Lisa. Lisa Adams, Nicole Leffer. Um, they're two of like the leading content creators on LinkedIn for marketing specifically. I can't think of other names off the top of my head. But if you go on LinkedIn and you follow them, you'll see other people who follow them and people who comment. And that's a really good way to just be connected to like what's going on. Like people will publish all the time on LinkedIn. I had to do this at my organization and I used this tool and I did this. Like people will just tell everybody what they're doing. There's so much learning and sharing. And so that'll be helpful to you when you go interview for companies because you'll already have sort of seen these playbooks, and I'm saying you can steal them, but it's not stealing them because people are putting them
They're
out there
out
for the
there.
public.
Yeah.
So it's like they're there for the taking. You have to take advantage of it. And then the other thing, which you're already doing, is do internships. I wish I had done real internships in college, but I didn't. I had jobs, but they weren't like aligned to my studies to figure out a career path. I totally wish I had done that. So, that gives you the real world experience, that you need as well. So good for you.
Thank you. Yeah. So just a final question.
Mhm.
What do you believe is the main difference from B2B and B2C marketing in terms of like your approach for trying to sell a product?
That's a really good question. I would say the the thing that's similar is that people make emotional buying decisions. I mean, people want to feel good about what they're buying. They want to feel good about who they're buying it from. In B2B, it tends to be more consensus driven. So you want to feel good that the whole team feels good, that the whole team likes what you're buying, that like everybody feels good about what you're buying. In B2C, it's one-on-one. And it might be with your spouse or like with somebody else, but it's like, I'm making this decision. I want to feel good about this decision. Um, but it's still driven from, emotion and sort of like individual motivation. And then the other thing that's really important is the volume of B2C is just so much higher and faster. The things that you need to do in B2C are generating volumes in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, whereas, B2B, depending on your business model, you might only generate 1,000 of something or even hundreds of something because, again, it's a different kind of sale. So those are two differences. Well, I guess a similarity and a
Yeah.
difference.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna cut the recording here. I can ask you some stuff like like off the recording,
Sure.
but thank you so much for your time,
You're
and
welcome.
for joining us.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of our UMBA Marketing Club's Thought Leadership Series. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
For behind the scenes content, events, and more, make sure to follow us on our socials linked down below. All of our handles are at UMB AI Marketing Club.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode where we continue to dive into the world of AI and marketing.